August 4th, 1892, Fall River, Massachusetts. The scorching summer heat hangs thick in the air as Andrew Borden returns home from a brief trip into town. Still weak and queasy from a mysterious illness thought to be food poisoning, he sinks into a nap on the parlor couch of his stately home at 92 2nd Street. But his peaceful slumber is about to be shattered by violence that will echo through history. For over a century, people have debated, did Andrew's own daughter wield the axe against him and her stepmother? Or was there another killer hiding in plain sight? This is the chilling story of Lizzie Borden. Did she really take an axe? Part 1. Hey y'all, I'm Kris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And I do know a little bit about this case, so I know there's some Irish connection here. So for our friends in Ireland, falcha.
I am actually from County Cork.
There you go.
I have people who are from County Cork.
Yeah. And I'm 69% Welsh, I found out.
I know.
We're
just a couple of mutts, honey.
Yeah.
What can we say?
I thought it was all German, but yeah.
I know. How about that?
Yep.
I know. I'm Irish and Native American. There you go.
Yep. And Scotty's all dog.
And Scotty is all Yorkie.
Yeah.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who love true crime just like you do can find us. Yep. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below.
Yes.
And if you want true crime with us all the time, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Just go to Facebook, type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws, answer a couple questions. You guys are being so good. You're answering questions.
Yes, thank you.
And you're in. Go join. I post photos and other information in there as well. It's a great group of people. We love them so much. That's our family. That's our true crime family.
Yep.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we also have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee.
Yes.
He drinks it every single episode, every single day. Y'all, I just can't do coffee. I don't know what it is.
I love my coffee.
Can't do it.
Yeah. I have my Nespresso. It's like my best friend. Besides you and Scotty.
Thank you. I come in second to a coffee machine.
No, you're number one. Scotty's number two. Okay. Nespresso's number three.
Okay. You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes, and it says, send Kris and Rob a text, and I've got a couple today.
Okay.
From Natchez, Mississippi. I love Natchez, Mississippi. It's beautiful.
Never been there.
I grew up in Faraday, Louisiana. This is the most thorough Jerry Lee Lewis story I have ever heard. That's one we did maybe last year.
Yeah.
I worked with Melanie Lewis, who is married to Ronnie Lewis. This was the first time I heard what a jerk Jerry Lee was.
I'm surprised that's the first time she heard that.
Really?
It was well known.
Your podcast has so much information. I'm going to listen to it again.
Nice.
I love your podcast. You keep my attention and you're easy to listen to. Thank you from Milan Parks in Natchez, Mississippi.
Nice.
And we also have one from Susan in Kentucky.
Okay.
I just listened to episode 1 and 2 of the Tom Brown case. That we just finished that one up. I was so disappointed when you were talking about March Madness because you didn't say go Cats.
Go Big Blue.
Go Cats. I will say it. Go Cats, because as of this moment, as we are recording, we're still dancing.
Yep.
So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
There you go.
She said, seriously, though, I love y'all. I'm an OG fan. And Susan actually asked for me to do more Kentucky cases, and I will get on it. There's a very long list. And speaking of, so many people asked for me to cover this case. So here we are.
Nice.
Everybody knows this story, right? Lizzie Borden took an axe.
Gave her mother 40 whacks.
That's right.
Yep.
When she saw what she had done.
She gave her father 41.
That's right.
I can't believe I remember that.
You didn't even need a jump rope for that one,
No,
right?
I didn't have to get on the computer.
Well, I'm just going to tell you now, there were not 40 whacks and 41 whacks. That is wrong.
Really?
So I don't know where that came from, but I thought it was pretty interesting.
Because it rhymed.
I guess. Before we get started, let me thank some sources: Rolling Stone Magazine, Murderpedia, FamousTrials.com, the Smithsonian Magazine, CrimeArchives.net, LizzieBorden.com, the Fall River Historical Society, 48 Hours, the Fall River Herald News, and many, many more that I will have links for in the show notes because I used so many sources. I'm not going to bore everybody with it right now. Just go to the show notes. There are links to everything.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Andrew Borden was born on September 13th, 1822 in Fall River, Massachusetts. He came from humble beginnings and wasn't born into wealth. Andrew, at the age of 23, married Sarah A. Morse on Christmas Day in 1845.
Okay.
Sarah was 1 year younger than he was, and they moved into a house on 92 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. And Andrew will later buy this home in 1871. But when they first move in, this home was built to be a two-family dwelling home.
It's like a duplex.
It's like a duplex, but it's all in one house. And there were separate entrances and everything, but we're going to talk about that because that's kind of important.
All right.
4 years after Sarah and Andrew tie the knot, Emma Lenora is born on March 1st, 1851, their first daughter. 5 years after this, on May 3rd, 1856, Alice Esther is born. But Alice will die when she's just 2 years old and 9 months. And then on March 10th...
Wait, do we know what she died from?
Yes, she actually died on March 10th, 1858 from hydrocephalus, a condition where excess cerebral spinal fluid builds up in the brain.
Yeah.
And on July 19th, 1860, just 1 year before the American Civil War, Sarah and Andrew had their third daughter, Lizzie Andrew. Lizzie is the name she is christened with. She was never an Elizabeth. So if you ever hear anybody call her Elizabeth, that's wrong.
Okay.
She was named Lizzie.
She was a Lizzie.
She was a Lizzie.
Okay.
During the Civil War years, Sarah, the mother, died on March 26, 1863, of uterine congestion, don't know what that is, and spinal disease. She was only 39 years old, but that left Andrew a widower at 40 years old.
I can't stop thinking about uterine congestion. Was that like a cold in the, you know what? Sorry.
I don't know. They had interesting names for things back then.
Yeah. Okay.
So I know that she had some sort of spinal problem.
Right.
Yeah, she was falling apart.
Okay.
At 39.
Gotcha.
So when she does die, Andrew's 40 and Emma is 12 years old and Lizzie is 2.5 years old. And on her deathbed, Sarah makes Emma promise to take care of little Lizzie. And by the time Sarah dies, Andrew has actually made some money. So he started kind of humble beginnings, but by this time, he's started to make some money. 2 years later, in 1865, Andrew Borden was outside the church waiting for Miss Abby Dufree Gray, a spinster in her late 30s. She's a spinster because she's in her 30s.
And well, that would make 90% of women in America spinsters right now.
Yeah, women who want to have a career, they're all spinsters, apparently.
Yeah. And 90%, I'm joking, so don't send emails.
Send them to him.
Yeah.
But Andrew walked Abby home from church, and 2 years and 2 months after his wife Sarah dies, Abby became the second Mrs. Borden on June 6th, 1865. She's 37. It was a June wedding. She was a June bride.
Gotcha.
She's 37. He is 42. Now, it's important to know that Emma, Lizzie's older sister, was old enough to remember her mom, Sarah. Lizzie was too young. And when their dad marries Abby, Emma's 14, Lizzie is 4.5, nearly 5 years old. And Emma will never call Abby mom, but Lizzie does. Lizzie calls her mother. Now, there are stories that Abby, Emma and Lizzie's stepmom, was cruel, but most believe that she was kind to the girls and even into when they're grown women. Andrew, Lizzie and Emma's dad, built his wealth through real estate, banking, and manufacturing. He owned rental properties, commercial buildings, and textile mills.
Wow.
He served as the president of the Union Savings Bank and was a director at the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Company.
He did pretty well.
He did, but even with a bunch of money, millions by today's standard, in the bank,
Right.
the Bordens lived in a very modest house and not in the wealthy section of Fall River. He's cheapity cheap, cheap, cheap. Now, while even the homes around the Borden house had electricity, the Borden house still used kerosene lamps.
Really?
Yeah. So everybody's modernizing, but Andrew's like, we don't need any of that.
Yeah.
We're just going to burn these kerosene lamps.
And you said he came from humble beginnings, right?
He did. He did.
That's why. I mean, I think people that like grew up in the Depression and things like that, which I know this is before, but they tend to like be a bit miserly because they don't want to lose it all.
Yeah, my grandmother could make a meal out of nothing. I've never seen anything like it, and she never wasted anything.
Yeah.
And here I am throwing Rob's leftovers away when he wants them 5 days later. Y'all, I don't even know. He was a bachelor too long. Too long.
Where'd that 6-month-old chicken go?
Yeah, where was that chicken breast from 2 weeks ago? I was going to eat that for lunch today. These are the things that I hear. And then I'm in there just clearing out everything.
It was still good.
But he's cheap. Back to the story. He's very cheap.
Yeah.
And there are sources that said that Andrew wouldn't put indoor plumbing in the house and made everybody use a chamber pot.
Oh.
But they did have indoor plumbing, and they did have indoor plumbing in the kitchen. So they had water in the kitchen, and in the cellar, there was actually a flushable toilet.
Okay.
Which brings me to a different subject, something I didn't know about Lizzie. She's a shoplifter. Like, as she's growing up, she's a shoplifter.
Wow.
Lizzie is actually accused of shoplifting multiple times in Fall River. And the exact records are all the incidents. They're very scarce. You can't really find them. But it's widely believed that Lizzie was caught shoplifting from local department stores and jewelry shops. And there are reports that the local merchants knew Lizzie was a shoplifter. But because of her dad and the Borden's family wealth, they didn't prosecute Lizzie. Instead, Andrew would just quietly pay off the store owners so there wouldn't be a scandal.
Wow.
So it's like, hey, Andrew, she came in and stole again today. And he's like, I'll be there to pay the bill.
Here's your tab.
Here it is. And this is all happening during Lizzie's 20s and into her 30s. But when Lizzie and Emma are grown, what they don't like is that their dad was giving what they considered their inheritance to their stepmom. Emma and Lizzie both thought that their stepmom was after their father's money. And by 1884 or 1885, they were up in arms over a house that Andrew gave to his wife, Abby, for the use of her half-sister, a Mrs. Whitehead, who was being evicted from her home. So he gives this property to his wife's half-sister. Like not even
her true sister.
Right.
Or blood sister, I should say.
And this infuriated Lizzie and Emma, and they think that their dad is putting the family of his wife and his wife, Abby, over what they considered to be his real family.
Right.
The two of them. Lizzie is quoted as saying, quote, "I said what he did for her people, he ought to do for his own children," end quote.
So what wasn't he doing for his own children? Hello?
Well, he wasn't giving them electricity.
Oh, well, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And they weren't living, even though he's got a lot of money, and I'm going to tell you how much in just a little bit.
Okay.
It's a lot.
All right.
They weren't living in like the posh part of town.
Right.
And Emma and Lizzie are like between their 20s and 30s. They're creeping into spinster area.
Right.
And they're not dating and they're not getting married.
Gotcha.
So they're living at home.
Sure.
In 1887, Lizzie and Emma actually leave the family home after tensions escalated, especially over Andrew's financial gifts to Abby and her family. So Andrew tries to make it all even, Steven, and he gives the two girls their maternal grandfather's house. So it was their mom's father's house.
Okay.
And they called it Grandfather Morse's homestead. They called it Grandfather's house. And it's on Ferry Street. And it actually belonged to their mom. When she passed away, it went to her dad. And so this is what he gives to the girls.
Was it a nice house?
It is. And this property was way more valuable than the house that he had gifted to his wife's half-sister.
Okay.
So he signs over the deed to the two girls, and they become landlords to this house. But this isn't going to last very long because the girls didn't like the work and responsibility that came with home ownership.
Wait a minute. You mean we have to take care of this thing?
I mean, it's true when you think about it. When you go from an apartment and you buy your first home.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
I mean, everybody's like, be a homeowner. It's great. And, you buy your first house and then everything starts falling apart.
Of course, yeah. And it never changes.
Never. Even if you move into a brand new house, there's always something that goes wrong that you have to have fixed.
Oh, Lord, I built 2 new houses. Every time you get into a new house, we got to get this fixed. Oh, wait. We need to do that. This doesn't work. Why doesn't this? Yeah.
I built a house and upstairs they forgot to tighten the bolts on one of the toilets. And I moved into my brand new house and toilet water started leaking through the ceiling of my kitchen.
Is that a problem?
Yeah, that was a problem.
Oh, okay.
That was a problem.
All right.
But they did not like this responsibility. So they sold the property back to their dad for $5,000 or about $167,000 in today's money.
All right.
Which really angered Abby because they were gifted the property and then their dad had to buy it back. So Abby wasn't too happy about this.
Yeah.
After Lizzie's dad gave the property to Abby's family, she refused to call Abby mother, even though she had been the only mother she'd ever known since she turned 5.
Okay.
And her older sister, Abby, never called her mom.
Sure.
So she called her by her first name, Abby, but Lizzie took it a step further and started calling her stepmother Mrs. Borden.
Oh.
Good morning, Mrs. Borden.
Here, let me slap you in the face a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Wow.
But Andrew, who's a wealthy man, he's trying to appease all the women in his life.
Sure.
He's trying to appease his daughters by letting them know that he had not forgotten about them. In November of 1889, the Bordens hire a new maid. Her name is Bridget Sullivan. She's young, only 23, and an Irish immigrant. By the way, I read that Irish immigrants were just a step above the Portuguese immigrants.
Yeah.
They were really looked down upon.
Yep.
And Bridget is replacing a woman named Margaret, who Lizzie and Emma called Maggie. And when Bridget started working there for the Bordens, Lizzie and Emma called Bridget Maggie. It's like The Devil Wears Prada, where she calls Andy Emily.
Yeah.
And like Miranda Priestley, they couldn't be bothered to use her real name.
Wow.
So they called her Maggie. Yeah.
That's just cold.
It is. And as much as many sources say that Emma and Lizzie were denied a life of privilege, they kind of weren't. Lizzie's father sent her on a long European holiday. In 1890, Lizzie took a grand tour of Europe. She was 30 years old, and she traveled with a group of other women and visited several countries and experienced European art and culture and history. That's not something that, the underprivileged get to do.
Exactly.
They're all leaving Europe to come to America.
Right.
On June 24th, 1891, the Borden house is robbed. Cash and jewelry were taken. Funny thing, Emma, Lizzie, and Bridget are all home at the time, and it's no secret that Lizzie steals things, and she's the prime suspect. So all the police knew that Lizzie, she was big into the 5-finger discount.
Right.
And from this moment forward, the doors of the Borden home are locked inside and out. They're always kept locked. There's like 3 locks on the front door.
Right.
By April of 1892, the Borden family, they're old. Andrew's just a month shy of turning 70. Abby's 64. She's really short and stout. She's 5'3" and weighs in at about 200 pounds.
Whoa.
That's a lot for a little frame.
Yeah.
Emma is now 42, and Lizzie is 32, and they're all living under one roof.
Wow.
And they loathe their stepmom. Emma and Lizzie loathe their stepmother, Abby. And Abby doesn't really like them much either at this point.
Okay.
According to Hannah Gifford, a Fall River cloak maker, Lizzie told her that Abby, quote, was a mean old thing. She's just a mean old thing. But I can't be bothered to call the maid by her real name.
Yeah, exactly.
But Abby's a mean old thing.
Man.
This home where they live on 92 2nd Street was 2 apartments when their dad bought it, like I said before. And even though he made it into one household, it is divided into 2 parts, and there were locks and barricades, including bars that separated the outside world from them and Abby and Andrew from Emma and Lizzie.
Jeez.
So they're living separate lives in different parts of this house, and they're using separate staircases.
Wow.
Emma and Lizzie didn't really eat dinner with their dad and stepmom. Andrew and Abby used the back stairs, and Emma and Lizzie used the front stairs. And Emma and Lizzie didn't really have guests. And when they did, it was other women, no gentlemen callers. They are considered spinsters, and the Borden family is keeping up appearances, but behind the curtain, they actually dislike one another and try not to pass each other in the hallways of the house.
Sounds like a wonderful homestead.
It's not that big. It is not that big.
Wow.
And these folks have Puritan roots, by the way. The Bordens of Southeast Massachusetts came to America in 1683.
Wow.
Richard and his wife, Joan Borden, came to Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and their descendants spread into Massachusetts and especially into the city of Fall River. And Fall River, where they live, is an industrial city in New England at the time. But the cotton mills have closed and the steamboats weren't really running anymore. The Civil War is over. In August of 1892, there were about 75,000 people living in Fall River. And as I said, Andrew J. Borden was the president of the town bank, Union Savings, and director of the First National Bank, and on the board of directors of the Safe Deposit and Trust Company. And he was on the board of directors of the Troy Cotton and Woolen Manufacturing Company.
Sounds like he had his hands in a lot of different things.
He did.
Yeah.
He was part of the Globe Yarn Mills and the Merchants Manufacturing Company. He's very well respected for his knowledge, and he was worth at the time about $300,000, or in today's money, about $10 million.
Wow.
So Daddy's got money,
Yep.
but he's still pretty miserly with his money. Still, as Lizzie's growing up, he gave Lizzie a diamond ring, a sealskin cape, and don't forget, she had her big old long holiday in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So were they really deprived, or were they just a little spoiled and they wanted more than Daddy was willing to give them?
Gee, let me think about this. Yeah, they were spoiled rotten.
I think they're a little spoiled, yeah.
Yeah.
But even as he did give money and houses and trips and diamonds and maids and clothing, for the amount of money he did have, he was a little bit miserly. So he does have $10 million and they don't have electricity.
Yeah.
But he's not just miserly with his family. An officer of his church, who just happened to be the local assessor of their property, increased the Borden's taxes. And Andrew was so pissed about it, he left the church, no longer sitting in his pew on Sundays.
Wow.
He was mad. But not Lizzie. Lizzie was very involved in her church. Something else she was involved in was the care of pigeons.
Pigeons?
Pigeons who roosted in the family barn. Lizzie was known to be fond of animals, and she cared for these pigeons and built roosts for them.
Did she ever think about maybe getting a dog? Jeez, pigeons.
I don't know if her dad would let her have a dog or a cat in the house.
Yeah.
But there are people who think that these birds, these pigeons, symbolized a sense of freedom and escape for Lizzie, who was frustrated by her strict and stifling life under the control of her father. And as long as she's unmarried, she's under the control of her dad. He controls the purse strings. If she wants a dress, it's up to him. If she wants anything, she's got to go to daddy.
Yeah. I was thinking, why didn't they just get a job? But back in those days, women didn't normally work, did they?
Not unless they were working class and were a maid or something like that, or they were a seamstress.
Sure.
And they're none of those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But these birds were kind of her little source of joy, and they were something she could control in the house where she felt controlled by her dad.
Right.
But in May or June of 1892, Andrew Borden used a hatchet to kill the pigeons in the family barn.
Ooh.
There are accounts that say he did it to prevent local boys from trespassing on his property in order to hunt the birds. Get off my lawn.
Yeah.
He's that guy.
You kids.
Yeah. You raised my property taxes. I got boys on my lawn. My house has been broken into.
And I got pigeons.
But no more.
Yep.
But there are other people who say he just thought the birds were a nuisance. And he kind of seems to be one of those no-nonsense guys. He didn't want the pigeons around anymore, so he cut their heads off with a hatchet.
Got rid of them.
There are loads of historians and Lizzie theorists who say that this event really upset Lizzie and might have fueled her growing resentment of her father. And there are those who believe it was part of the motive for what's about to happen. On July 21st, 1892, Lizzie and Emma leave Fall River after a family disagreement. Don't know what that was, but they didn't seem to get along over anything. Lizzie's sister Emma went to visit a family friend, Mrs. Hiram Brownell, in Fairhaven. Fairhaven is about 15 miles from Fall River. And Lizzie traveled with Emma as far as New Bedford, where she was visiting a friend of her own, Alice Gray. She stayed for 4 or 5 days, and while Lizzie is with Alice, she tells her about how much she hates her stepmother and how frustrated she is with her dad. And there are some accounts of this exchange with Mrs. Brownell that say Lizzie told her that she felt trapped and mistreated. Lizzie had talked about extending her trip by going to the town of Marion for a stay, but this didn't happen. She traveled to Marion only for a day trip before coming home to the house on 2nd Street in Fall River. Emma remained in Fairhaven. Now, Lizzie tells her friends that she had to cut her trip to Marion short because she'd taken over the offices of Secretary and Treasurer of the Christian Endeavor Society, and there was to be a roll call on the first Sunday in August. And she wanted to be there. Remember, I told you she's very involved in the church.
Right.
She's also a part of the Christian women's temperance movement.
Gotcha.
No alcohol.
Right.
No fun, right?
Yep.
By August of 1892, it was hotter than the hinges of hell in Fall River. And it's been thought that at some time during this summer of 1892 that Andrew Borden made his will. There's no hard evidence for this, but it is a point that all Lizzie Borden scholars seem to agree on. It's not known if he consulted an attorney or if Lizzie overheard a conversation. Then on Tuesday, August 2nd, Andrew and Abby wake up and are very, very sick. The other two in the house are Lizzie and Bridget, the maid, who Lizzie calls Maggie. Mm-hmm. Andrew and Abby have what I read was a severe vomiting illness. So maybe food poisoning. According to Lizzie, she was also sick, but nobody saw any evidence of this. Mm. And she said she wasn't as sick as her father and stepmother. Okay. According to Lizzie, she never threw up and felt okay the day after, but apparently it was so bad, according to Lizzie, that she knocked on their barricaded door and offered to help them because she could hear them puking in the other room.
Wow.
They were driving the Buick. That's what we used to say when I was in college.
The Technicolor yawn.
Got to go drive the Buick.
That's funny.
Lizzie says that her father and Abby told her, there's nothing you can do for us. And according to Bridget, their dinner that night was swordfish warmed over for dinner. Ugh. And baker's bread.
Yuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Warmed over swordfish.
Warmed over swordfish.
I wonder why they were puking.
Well, I don't know. There might be another reason.
Yeah.
The day after their illness hit on August 3rd, Abby Borden wants to see Dr. Bowen, who lives across the street and is their family doctor. And Abby Borden tells the doctor that she believed she and Andrew had been poisoned. Dr. Bowen comes to the house to see Andrew, but Andrew wouldn't see him because he didn't want to pay the doctor for an extra exam on another person.
Wow.
So Abby went across the street to see the doctor.
This guy's a piece of work.
And then he came over to the house, and Andrew's like, nope, I'm not paying the doctor. Send him out. It's not happening.
Man. Wow.
Then, oddly enough, later that day, Lizzie felt well enough to visit a pharmacy where she tries unsuccessfully to buy prussic acid, which this was occasionally used in medicine in extremely diluted forms to treat conditions like asthma and coughs, but it was highly dangerous due to its toxicity.
I'm going to say they probably don't use that these days.
I don't think they do.
Wow.
It was a favorite in the Victorian era for murder by poisoning or even suicide. She travels to Smith's drugstore in New Bedford, where she asks druggist Eli Bentz for this acid, claiming she wanted it to clean a sealskin cape. Now, we know she has a sealskin cape because her dad bought her one.
Right.
And a diamond ring and all the other things.
Right.
But prussic acid or hydrocyanic acid had rapid and deadly effects on the nervous system and could cause death within minutes by interfering with oxygen absorption at the cellular level.
Wow.
The pharmacist tells Lizzie, no, you need a prescription for this.
Right.
And he turns her away. She walks out the door. That same day, August 3rd, around 1:30 in the afternoon, Mr. John Vinicum Morse showed up at the house on 2nd Street. John is a tall, dignified, white-bearded old farmer who is the brother to the first Mrs. Borden, Sarah, and uncle to Emma and Lizzie.
Okay.
He was born in 1833, and he was a farmer and a horse trader who spent much of his time traveling between Massachusetts and Iowa and Illinois. John was in town conducting some business, and some people think he was there to inspect Andrew's farms in Somerset and Swansea to advise on their management. Others say he was bringing horses from the West. Either way, Andrew likes his brother-in-law, and Uncle John was more than welcome to stay in their home. I did read that he didn't show up with more than a toothbrush and a nightshirt. If he had those, he carried them in his pockets because he didn't have any luggage.
Okay.
Around 4 in the afternoon, Uncle John went to inspect Andrew Borden's farm in Swansea, quote, to see about cattle, end quote. John will stay there until early evening, returning to the house on 2nd Street at 8:30 p.m. or a little bit later. There's nothing about him eating dinner with the family that night, although I did read that mutton soup was for dinner. Between the time John gets back to the Borden house and around 10 p.m., he chats with Abby and Andrew in the sitting room in the parlor. And that night, Lizzie, who'd felt bad all day long, or so she said, she decided to take the evening air and go visit her best friend, Miss Alice Russell, on Borden Street. That's right. There's a street named after the Bordens. Now, Alice at one time had been Lizzie's next-door neighbor, and she was really more of a friend to Emma than Lizzie. But Alice was somebody Lizzie confided in, and she would often tell Alice what was going on inside her head, her thoughts and feelings about life. She would also talk crap about her father and her stepmother, and she would also talk to Alice about her father's business dealings. Alice tells Lizzie to get out of town. And Lizzie says she's going to take Alice's advice and go to Marion, but that she felt so depressed. Quote, I feel as if something is hanging over me that I cannot throw off. Father has so much trouble, and he and Mrs. Borden were awfully sick last night. We were all sick, but Maggie. We had some baker's bread and all ate of it, but Maggie, sometimes I think our milk might be poisoned. I feel afraid sometimes that Father has got an enemy. He has so much trouble with his men, and I saw a man run around the house one night, and the barn, it's been broken into twice, end quote. So is Lizzie setting up a little something here?
You think? Let's throw somebody under the bus.
And Alice tells Lizzie, that's just the neighborhood boys, and I highly doubt that Maggie is poisoning the milk.
Yeah.
To which Lizzie tells her, quote, well, they've broken into the house in broad daylight. They ransacked Mrs. Borden's dressing room, took a watch and a chain, money, and car tickets. Father went to the police about it, but the police didn't find anything, end quote. This is the robbery everybody seems to think that Lizzie perpetrated herself.
Yeah.
She continues to tell Alice that they, quote, they had been around the Borden house and that further mischief was expected from, quote, them, end quote. I'm afraid somebody will do something. I don't know what, but that somebody will do something. I feel as if I want to sleep with one eye open for fear they will burn the house down over us, end quote.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Around 9 p.m., Lizzie walked home, let herself in with her door key, and closed the double-locked door. Her dad and stepmom, along with her uncle, who she hasn't even seen yet, are in the little sitting room in the parlor by the front hall.
Right.
She didn't speak to them, and they didn't say anything to her. And without so much as a word, Lizzie went up the staircase and directly to her room. Now, because this house was originally a two-family residence with each, having its own separate entrances and living spaces,
right.
And Emma and Lizzie used one staircase and Andrew and Abby used the other. So maybe she didn't see them because she came into the house through the back door, but it's, they said that she came through the front door. So she had to have seen them based on how the house is laid out.
Sure.
Yeah. But I did read that the front door and the front staircase led directly to Emma and Lizzie's bedrooms, which were located in the front portion of the second floor. They could get to their own bedrooms without walking through their parents' bedrooms. And the guest room where Uncle John was sleeping was also in the front part of the house and up the front staircase. And the guest room was just to the immediate left as soon as you walk up the stairs.
And you're saying this house wasn't all that big?
It's not that big. It's not that big. I will post pictures in the in-laws and outlaws of the layout of the house.
Okay.
Because I have the floor plans.
All right.
But when you go up the staircase, the guest room is to the immediate left. That's called foreshadowing. Yep. That was big time.
There you go.
That night, Uncle John slept in the front bedroom, the guest chamber, and he got up on Thursday, August 4th around 6 a.m. Bridget was the first to come downstairs where she did her morning chores and built a fire in the kitchen stove. Remember, it's August. It's hotter than hell. She's building a fire in the kitchen stove.
Why didn't they just turn on the air conditioning? Just kidding.
At 7 a.m., Andrew and Abby ate breakfast with John. At 8:45, Uncle John left the house to run some errands and make some social calls with family members across town. Andrew walked him to the side door and let him out, locking it after John leaves, but not before telling him to come back for dinner later in the day.
Okay.
Andrew and Abby busy themselves doing their normal routine. Bridget took care of none of the bedrooms except her own and never went to the second floor of the house. And Bridget actually lives on the third floor, where it's got to be hotter than, Satan's underpants.
Right.
Mrs. Borden started dusting some of the rooms downstairs. It was around 9 a.m. when Lizzie came downstairs. She didn't eat breakfast, but did have a cup of coffee. She and her stepmother exchanged words about household affairs. Bridget had finished her breakfast, but felt bad. She had a sick headache and had to go into the backyard to throw up, to drive the Buick. Everyone's tossing their cookies in this house. Everybody except Lizzie and Uncle John, who didn't eat with them. When Bridget goes back into the house after getting sick, Andrew Borden had left the house to make some business calls, taking with him some letters that Lizzie had asked him to mail. And according to Bridget, this was around 9:15 a.m.
Okay.
Abby Borden, who apparently didn't care that Bridget was sick, gave her instructions to wash the windows. You're sick? Too bad. Wash the windows.
Wow.
Bridget got her brushes and pails from the cellar and the barn. She closed the windows and started going from room to room, from the front to the rear. She rested for a few minutes on the side of the house to chat with Dr. Kelly, the neighbor on that side. She was all around this house washing the windows, and she left the side door unlocked while she was outside cleaning.
Okay.
Now, with Uncle John and Andrew both out of the house and Bridget outside washing windows, only Lizzie and her stepmother, Abby, remained inside the house. Abby tidied up the guest room where John Morse was staying and made the bed. She came downstairs and told Lizzie that she was going up again to put fresh pillowcases on the guest room bed. Now, while Bridget is doing windows, she's looking inside each room, and all of them were empty from the outside.
Right.
Around 9:30 a.m., Bridget is making her way to the barn and sees Lizzie standing in the back doorway. And Lizzie tells Bridget not to lock the doors as long as she was outside working. Keep these doors open while you're outside. Mm-hmm. By now, it's between 9:30 and 10 a.m. Abby Borden goes upstairs with the pillowcases. She enters the guest room. Now, it's not really known how it happened. Was she cornered when she was in the room? Was someone waiting for her in the room? What we do know is that while she's tidying up the guest room and standing on the left side of the bed, Abby Borden was struck with a hatchet in the head and neck. 17 blows to the skull, one just above her right ear and one to the upper neck.
I think one blow would have done it.
You think?
Jeez.
The pattern of wounds showed that she was initially facing her attacker. That's the strike above her right ear, and was then attacked from behind while she bent over the bed in the guest room. She collapsed face down, and her killer continued to strike her with the hatchet.
Wow.
Now, while this is happening, Bridget is still outside washing windows. But when she finishes, she comes into the house through the back and goes to her room and lies down. Remember, she's been sick that morning.
Right.
While Andrew Borden is out, he walked downtown and back visiting shops and banks. When he returned home, it's about 10:45 a.m. Mrs. Kelly, the neighbor, was passing the house on her way to the dentist's office and saw Andrew coming out the yard from the side door. Andrew discovered that it was locked because Bridget is now inside. So he goes to the front door where he tries his key.
Okay.
Bridget, who's lying down upstairs on the third floor, hears Andrew at the front door, and she gets up and lets him in. And it's difficult because the front door is triple locked with a key, a bolt, and a spring lock. And as she's doing this, Bridget can hear Lizzie standing at the head of the front of the stairs. She makes enough noise that Bridget turns around to see her. And when she does, Lizzie lets out a laugh. And this is significant because apparently anyone who was standing on that landing was 15 feet away from Abby Borden's dead body. Mm. But Lizzie seemed unbothered by it.
Wow.
Lizzie comes downstairs and asks her father if there were any letters. She wants to know if there's mail. And then unprompted, she says to her father, quote, "Mrs. Borden has gone out. She had a note from somebody who is sick," end quote. Now, many think she did this preemptively before he could ask where his wife was.
Right.
And Andrew wasn't feeling well either, remember. He's still a little bit sick from the day before.
Right.
And he was tired from walking in the heat. So he took the key of his bedroom from a shelf and went up the back stairs to his bedroom. Then after a few minutes, he returned to the sitting room where there were two windows, both open on the south side toward the Kellys' home. Later, the Kellys will say it was odd because the shades were drawn in both windows. And that wasn't customary, especially on a hot day in August.
Yeah.
They just want to air that house out as much as possible.
Right.
Bridget is back downstairs after letting Andrew into the house. She hangs up her cloths from cleaning windows in the kitchen where Lizzie is. Then Lizzie moves to the dining room to start to iron handkerchiefs. And she asks Bridget about her plans, saying, quote, Maggie, are you going out, end quote. And Bridget replied, I may not. I don't feel well, end quote. Then Lizzie says to her, quote, if you do go out, be sure to lock the door. Mrs. Borden has gone out. Somebody is sick, and I might go out too, end quote. And Bridget asked, who's sick? And Lizzie says, quote, I don't know. She had a note this morning. It must be in town, end quote. Then a few more minutes pass, and Bridget is putting her kitchen in order. And Lizzie comes into the kitchen and says to Bridget, quote, there's a cheap sale of dress goods at Sargent's at 8 cents a yard, end quote. And Bridget's like, oh, that's nice, but she didn't make a move to leave the house.
Right.
So Lizzie's like giving her a reason to leave the house.
Yeah.
But she did, however, go back upstairs to her room because she wanted to take a nap for a half hour.
Wait, Bridget went back up to her room?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Lizzie's saying, there's a sale at Sargent's.
Right.
You should go because it's just 8 cents a yard. And Bridget's like, I feel like ass. I'm going upstairs to lay down in my bed.
Right.
So now Lizzie's alone downstairs with her father, who's come to the sitting room. And she helps her dad take off his coat, and he lies down on the couch. Now, no one knows how long Bridget was in her room on the third floor, 10 or 20 minutes. She says she heard the clock at City Hall strike 11. She's laying on her bed dozing. And while Bridget is dozing, Andrew Borden is also taking a nap on the couch in the sitting room. And this is when he is struck in the head and face 11 times with a hatchet. One of the first strikes split his left eyeball in half. The blows crushed his skull, causing massive trauma and nearly obliterating his face.
Jeez.
Then suddenly Bridget was awake. Lizzie is calling to her from the foot of the back stairs, Maggie, come down. Bridget yells back at Lizzie, what's the matter? And Lizzie says, quote, come down here. Father's dead. Someone came in and killed him, end quote. Bridget rushes downstairs and Lizzie is standing near the side door. Bridget wants to go in and look in the sitting room, but Lizzie stops her saying, quote, no, Maggie, don't go in there. Go over and get the doctor. I must have him. Run, end quote. And Bridget hurries across the street to Dr. Bowen's home, where she finds out that the doctor isn't there. So she leaves a message and hurries back. And during this time, Bridget is thinking, how did Miss Lizzie escape this killer? She was downstairs too.
Well, and the doors are all locked.
Well,
how could anyone get in if all the doors are locked?
Good question.
Yeah, there you go.
But Bridget wants to know, how'd you escape this? And did you see who it was? Did you see the killer's face?
Mm-hmm.
Bridget goes back into the house and tells Lizzie that the doctor's out and asks her, quote, where were you, Miss Lizzie, when this happened, end quote.
Right.
And Lizzie said, I was out in the yard and heard a groan and came in and the screen door was wide open. Then Lizzie told Bridget to go and get Miss Alice Russell, her BFF, Lizzie's friend, who she'd visited just the night before because she couldn't bear to be alone.
Right.
And Bridget leaves, and now Lizzie is alone in the house with a bleeding corpse of her father.
Yeah.
Before Alice could make it to the house, Mrs. Adelaide Churchill could tell that something was going on in this house. She could tell something's wrong. She knew Abby and Andrew had been sick, and now she's watching Bridget run in and out of the house. So Adelaide sees Lizzie at the side door and calls across to her saying, is there anything wrong? And Lizzie yells back at her, quote, oh, Miss Churchill, do come over. Someone has killed father, end quote.
Okay.
Adelaide walks over to the Borden house and asks Lizzie, where is your father? And she tells her that he's in the sitting room. And Adelaide, like Bridget, asks Lizzie, where were you when it happened?
Yeah.
And Lizzie said, I went to the barn to get a piece of iron. And it's then that Adelaide asks about Abby, saying, where's your mother? And Lizzie tells her that she didn't know where her stepmother was, that she had a note to go see somebody who was sick, but, quote, I don't know if she is killed too. I thought I heard her come in, end quote.
Oh, wow.
Adelaide goes to get help. She wanted another doctor. At Hull's stable, she tells what she knows to the men, and one of them telephoned to the police station. Now, on this particular day, it just so happened that it was the annual police picnic. And there were bands playing and a clam bake, and only a third of the officers were actually on duty. But the police chief and head of the force, City Marshal Rufus Hilliard, was at his post, and he received the message at 11:15.
Okay.
Now, when Adelaide gets back to the house, Dr. Bowen is with Lizzie. He saw that Lizzie was being comforted by Angela and Bridget. They're rubbing her forehead and her hands, telling her to lie down, loosen your dress and your corset. And Dr. Bowen walks into the sitting room. And Lizzie's behavior is unsettling to everybody around her. She showed no signs of distress or visible emotion. In fact, everybody around her is more worked up than she is.
Right.
According to Dr. Bowen, quote, Mr. Borden lay partly on his right side with his coat thrown over the arm of the sofa. His feet rested on the carpet. It was his custom way to lie, end quote. Dr. Bowen was convinced that Andrew Borden was asleep when he received the first blow, which was fatal. His clothing wasn't disarranged, and his pockets had apparently not been touched, and the wounds are fresh, so fresh that Andrew Borden is still bleeding. Blood is dripping from his body onto the carpet.
Ouch.
His body is warm, and Andrew's wounds were so bad, along with the massive amount of blood, it made him unrecognizable. The cuts extended from the eye and nose around the ear.
Okay.
Quote, in a small space, there were at least 11 distinct cuts. Physician that I am and accustomed to all kinds of horrible sights, it sickened me to look upon the dead man's face. The cuts were about 4.5 inches in length, and one of them had severed the eyeball and socket. There was blood on the floor and spatters on the wall, but nothing to indicate the slaughter had taken place. I calculated that nearly all the blows were delivered from behind with great rapidity, end quote. So this is the doctor's assessment.
Right.
He covered Andrew's body with a sheet, and Bridget apparently said, maybe we should get 2 sheets. And for some reason, that bothered people. And I don't know why, but that was in all the sources. She was like, it's kind of weird. Maybe we should get 2.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Well, is it? I mean, he's still bleeding. He's probably bleeding through that sheet.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
But for some reason, people thought it was odd that Bridget wanted 2 sheets.
Yeah.
Now, the other ladies didn't go and look. They could only see his feet. Lizzie asked Dr. Bowen to go to his carriage to the telegraph office and to send a wire to her sister Emma, who was in Fairhaven, to tell her that her father was dead. Now, when Dr. Bowen left, Lizzie suggested that they look for Mrs. Borden. Somebody go look for her. And Bridget didn't want to go alone, so Adelaide Churchill went up the stairs, and these women were afraid that this killer is still in the house.
Right.
But Lizzie didn't seem so worried about this. And Adelaide got to the top of the landing to turn into the guest room and sees on the floor on the other side of the bed a human figure. Adelaide and Bridget both come running down the stairs. Dr. Bowen was soon back, and they tell him there's another body upstairs. And he went up and into the room. Against the wall on the other side of the bed was a dressing table with a marble top, and between the bed and the dressing table was Abby Borden. She'd been savagely hacked with locks of her hair chopped off. So that's a sharp hatchet.
Yeah.
She's lying face down in a pool of coagulated blood, and her body is cold. After this, friends, neighbors, policemen, physicians, and reporters are all over the house. They're traipsing all through this house.
Yeah, well, first of all, they're disturbing all the evidence. And it's
They are.
definitely not a CSI scene.
It is not CSI.
Wow.
CSI Borden House.
Yeah.
First on the scene is Officer George Allen. And the police actually guard the doors to the house because there were so many curious people out in the street. And they're trying to peek through all the windows.
Right.
But soon, completely unaware of what's happened, John Morse, Uncle John, walks into the side yard. I actually read that he picked a pear off of a tree and started eating it. And then he walks into the side yard. He was finished with his business. He's coming back for dinner. And when he walked into the house, he was told that his brother-in-law was dead, and so was his wife, Abby. Surprise!
Yeah. Welcome home.
Yeah.
And his first reply was, okay, does that mean we're not having dinner?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
They're not going to reheat the mutton?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But he reportedly spent most of the day in the backyard after viewing the bodies, which some found suspicious. But it could have also been a natural reaction to the shock of the scene. So if I saw dead, I wouldn't want to be in the house either. I'd stay outside as well.
Yeah.
Now, it's been said that the police of Fall River made a mess of the crime scene from the get-go.
Yeah.
The police didn't really know how to handle these murders, and they didn't really question the women or inspect their clothing for bloodstains or anything like that, only visual. No one, including Lizzie, had blood spatter on them.
Well, that was going to be my first question. Did she change her clothes? And if she did, where did she put them?
And how quickly would she be able to get in and out of a corset and clothes and all of that kind of stuff? Right.
Yeah.
Deputy Marshal John Fleet was the first one to question Lizzie about what happened, but the Fall River police failed to diligently search both the house and the people present during the morning of the murders.
Okay.
Lizzie's strange behavior raised suspicions, but investigators didn't thoroughly check her for bloodstains or other evidence. And looking through a woman's belongings was considered inappropriate at that time, even if she was a primary suspect in a double homicide case.
Wow.
Now, while John Fleet is questioning Lizzie about what happened, she's really detached. And when Officer Fleet calls Abby Borden her mother, Lizzie says to him with indignation, "She is not my mother. She is my stepmother. My mother is dead." So she's very out of it. And then they call her mom. She's not my mom. Yeah.
No more wire hangers. I'm sorry. I don't know where that came from.
Just by eyeballing the situation, it was pretty obvious that Abby had been dead longer than Mr. Borden. And because people had seen Andrew out and about that morning, they knew he was killed sometime after 10:45 when he walked into the house. And everyone seemed to understand that some fiend, an unknown assassin, had come into the house and killed Abby and Andrew. The killer was a maniac. And not long before these murders, everyone knew of the Whitechapel murders of Jack the Ripper that took place just 4 years beforehand. And they're thinking, had Jack the Ripper made his way across the ocean to America? But everyone was a bit perplexed, not only by Lizzie's behavior that day, but as to why Lizzie and Bridget had been spared by this killer.
Right.
And the neighbors didn't sleep that night, and even Martin Feeney, the policeman who was stationed outside, was a little bit jumpy. Although Martin, who was Irish, thought that Bridget was hot stuff. He was this young Irish dude, and he thought he might be able to get a young Irish lassie like Bridget to talk.
Right.
But when he asked her about the murders, she wouldn't say a word. Quote, "I'd be afraid to say anything at all. If I did, that terrible man that killed poor Mrs. Borden might come back and kill me too." End quote.
Okay.
So everyone's saying, "Oh, poor Lizzie, you're so lucky this madman didn't kill you too." And the police and everyone around Lizzie, they're kind of in awe of this heiress.
Right.
Because remember, these are working class folks.
Sure.
And Lizzie's so wealthy, and they were a little blinded by it all and didn't really notice that Lizzie didn't actually seem to care that she didn't know her stepmother had been murdered upstairs while she and Bridget were downstairs in the kitchen and in the dining room. But then to be unaware of the murder in the sitting room while she's at home, the police and many people in town were all asking the same question. Lizzie, where were you when all of this happened?
Right.
She told Bridget that she had come in from the backyard when she heard a groan. She told Adelaide Churchill that she went to the barn to get a piece of iron. Quote, "I heard a distressing noise and came back and found the screen door open." End quote. Then when her girlfriend Alice Russell showed up, she told her that she was out in the barn getting a piece of tin or iron to fix the screens. When Officer Fleet asked her, she told him, "I was up in the barn for a half hour." She told Dr. Bowen, quote, "I was in the barn to get some iron," end quote. To Officer Doherty, quote, "I was in the barn, heard no screams, did hear some noise like scraping." To Officer Harrington, quote, "I went out into the barn. I remained there for 20 minutes. I was up in the loft." Her final version of her story was that she was in the barn looking for sinkers for a fishing line. She was looking for iron to make sinkers for her fishing line. She was planning on going fishing.
Okay.
But the officers weren't upset or even intrigued by Lizzie's different stories. She should have been in shock. She should have been. She wasn't emotional or grief-stricken at all. The only calm person at 92 2nd Street from the hours of 11:15 to 2 p.m. on August 4th was Lizzie Borden. There were no tears, no signs of agitation, no fear or confusion, no signs of grief. And while the others were in a panic as the bodies were discovered and folks were showing up, Lizzie looked at her friend Alice and said, quote, "When is it necessary for an undertaker? I want Winwood," end quote.
Okay.
Yeah. She told Officer Harrington that she was up in the barn loft for 20 minutes. They couldn't figure out why on one of the hottest days in the summer, she was, ironing handkerchiefs, or she was up in this barn loft, or she would suddenly seek out the hottest and dustiest place on the property so conveniently during the time of the murders.
Right.
She'd heard a groan and a distressing noise, a scraping noise. At first, she said she heard her father moan. And how can that happen if she's in the barn?
Well, and two, if somebody gets hacked the way he did, I don't think there's going to be a moan.
Yeah.
I mean, that first blow killed him.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Whatever.
Yeah. But the police weren't giving her the third degree by any stretch of the imagination. Dr. Bowen told the police how Abby and Andrew had been sick and that he thought that the milk might have been the reason. Dr. Dolan, the medical examiner, took samples of the milk for analysis, but it was negative for any poison. Still, the police went to all the pharmacies asking around if anyone had purchased poison. And when they went to D.R. Smith at the corner of Main and Columbia Streets, Eli Bentz, the clerk there, said that on Wednesday, the day before the murders, sometime between 10 and 11:30 a.m., a woman known only to him by sight came into the pharmacy asking for 10 cents worth of prussic acid. She wanted it to use on a sealskin cape. He wouldn't sell it to her, saying she needed a prescription. And the woman, Eli said, was Miss Lizzie Borden. But it wasn't just Eli who saw her. Other men, Frederick Hart and Frank Kilroy, who also worked as a clerk there, overheard Lizzie asking for the poison.
Yeah.
And he agreed that the woman asking for it was indeed Lizzie Borden, because that very day, Eli was taken to the Borden house and he was placed where he could see Lizzie from far away from her.
Right, right.
And he repeated. He was like, that's her. She's the one.
That's the girl.
After the murders, the police thought that Bridget Sullivan and John Morse were both suspicious characters, but neither had anything to gain from the deaths of Abby and Andrew. It was actually more advantageous for John to have Andrew and Abby Borden alive. They were both off the suspect list pretty quickly, though. John was with his relatives a mile away until after the murders, and if he'd left his relatives a little bit sooner, he might have interrupted the second murder. As far as evidence, the only reliable accounts of Lizzie's appearance that morning came from Alice Russell and Bridget Sullivan, who, like the police, didn't see anything unusual with Lizzie's hair or her clothing at the time.
Right.
And during the search of the house, several hatchets were discovered in the cellar. One with a particular hatchet, it drew suspicion because its handle was broken. And it's matching the same size to the wounds, which is about 3.5 inches.
Right.
There's no blood on it. The surrounding dirt and ash suggested that it was covered in ash to get rid of the blood or to cover up any blood.
Mm-hmm.
But the hatchets weren't immediately removed from the house when they were found. They were left there for several days before being taken in as evidence. Also in the cellar washroom, police find a pail with bloody rags. And when they question Lizzie about it, Lizzie tells them she's menstruating. And the police are like, whoa now. That's too much information, Liz.
Yeah.
We're not going there. And they completely drop that line of questioning.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, man.
That night, August 4th, an officer observed Lizzie and Alice Russell heading to the house's cellar, carrying a kerosene lamp and a pail likely belonging to either Andrew or Abby. They both left together, but Lizzie returned alone shortly afterward. Though the officer couldn't see what she was doing, Lizzie spent some time bent over the sink. So perhaps it was the pail with the bloody rags, or something else was bloody.
Mm-hmm.
As for the note that was said to have been delivered to Abby Borden, it was never found. Lizzie couldn't recall its whereabouts, and her Alice suggested that she might have thrown it into the fire to dispose of it. And when she says this, Lizzie goes, yes, that's what she did with it.
Oh, man.
And as the hours drag on, Andrew and Abby's bodies were photographed and then laid on the dining room table for examination.
Ugh.
Medical experts removed their stomachs to test for poison, but the results came back negative. Also in this hothouse in August, these two bludgeoned bodies are on the dining room table for days.
Oh.
They performed their autopsies inside the house on the dining room table.
Good Lord.
Now, as you might imagine, the press was running with headlines like, "What did Lizzie want of poison?"
Yeah.
Then the next day in the Fall River Globe was an interview with a brother-in-law of Andrew Borden, Hiram C. Harrington, a blacksmith. He was the husband of Andrew's only sister. He told the paper that, quote, "The motive of the crime was money, unquestionably money. Last evening, I had a long interview with Miss Lizzie, who was refused to see anyone else. She was very composed, showed no signs of emotion. This did not surprise me. She told him to remove his coat and helped him put on his dressing gown or robe and asked how he was feeling," end quote. According to Lizzie's uncle, she told him she helped him to get comfortable on the sofa and asked him if he wanted the blinds closed. Then she went directly into the barn to get some lead. It was her plan to go to Marion, and she wanted the lead in the barn loft to make some sinkers. And Lizzie's an avid angler, apparently. She tells her uncle that it was hard to know how long she was in the barn because she was cutting the lead into sizable sinkers, but she thought it was about 20 minutes. Then on second thought, maybe it was 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's a ticket.
That's what it is. Then Uncle Hiram tells the reporters that, quote, "Lizzie did most of the demonstrative contention, as Emma is quiet and unassuming. Lizzie, on the contrary, is haughty and domineering, with the stubborn will of her father and bound to contest for her rights. Lizzie is a repellent of disposition, and after an unsuccessful passage with her father would become sulky and refuse to speak to him for days at a time. Her father's constant refusal to allow her to entertain lavishly angered her, and I have heard many bitter things she has said of her father," end quote. Then he added, quote, "I'm positive Emma knows nothing of the murder," end quote. And what of Emma? When Emma gets the telegraph, you'd think she would rush home. But she didn't take the next available train home. She didn't even take the second available train home. She took the third.
Really?
But basically, Uncle Hiram has told the press that Lizzie wanted more from her father, and when she didn't get it, she was a brat. But Lizzie got him back. When she was asked at the inquest to name anybody who was on bad terms with her father, without hesitation, she said, "Hiram C. Harrington."
Oh, man.
She's like, "You want to throw me under the bus? Watch me throw you under the bus."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, the police are really interested in this note that Lizzie said that came to her stepmom about somebody being sick. Who was this person?
Mm-hmm.
And a newspaper named Once a Week, that's the name of the newspaper, was giving a reward of $500 to anyone who knew the sick person's name. But Lizzie said she never saw the note or the boy who brought it to the house, and she didn't know the sender of the note or whether her stepmother even answered the call.
Okay.
So here's what the public knows. That the assassin had struck the victims in broad daylight at their home on a busy street 1 block from the town's business district. There was no evidence of motive like robbery or sexual assault. Neighbors and passersby heard nothing. No one saw a suspect enter or leave the Borden property. Andrew is warm to the touch and still bleeding. Abby was cold. Except for blood around the bodies, there's no blood anywhere. And the police asked for Lizzie's dress from the day of the murders, and she handed over the dress, and only a small drop of blood was on the hem of the dress, and there was also a drop of blood on her underwear, to which the police were like, yeah, we've already talked about this. We're good.
Wow.
Andrew and Abby were laid to rest on Saturday, August 6th, 1892, and an editorial ran in the Fall River newspaper that criticized the police on the same day. So the pressure is on.
Sure.
Then the mayor of Fall River, John Coughlin, tells Lizzie after the funeral that she is the prime suspect. Sorry about your dad.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we think you're the killer.
Yeah.
Next week, Lizzie's questioned, arrested, and goes to trial for the murder of her father and stepmother. Until then, that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kywolf Project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
Okay, well, here's my take so far.
All right, I'm interested. Let's hear your take. Rob's take.
Rob's take. First of all, Lizzie is very conniving. And
yes.
it's extremely apparent from the get-go because of the way that she, her interaction with her mother and her stepmother and her father. But she's not very bright in the respects of planning this thing out and having a solid alibi.
Yeah, she's a manipulator for sure.
Yeah.
A big manipulator.
And I think because she comes from a privileged background, she just expects everyone to believe what she says.
She does.
Yeah. So therefore, she really doesn't have to prove anything.
I don't think she thinks that she does.
Yeah. And
she can explain away, any evidence that they have.
Yeah. The second thing that I want to say is that, the question I had before as far as blood spatter and all that stuff, and then you made the comment about, how would she change her corset? But you have to understand, during that period, and I've seen pictures of her, black and whites, the collar's all the way up to here, and it's really thick fabric.
Yep.
The dresses are very thick. So any kind of blood spatter, I don't think would soak through to her corset.
If she's wearing black, you mean? Or could you even see blood spatter on a black dress?
That's true. That's true too.
Because they don't have luminol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just think because of the fabric so thick and blah, 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 I don't think she had to worry about changing her corset.
No, I didn't mean that she would have to change her corset.
Yeah.
What I meant was they wear all these corsets and petticoats.
Yeah.
It takes a while to get dressed.
Yeah.
So it's not like, she's got on sweatpants where she can just whip her clothes off and on and be in something different.
Right. But couldn't she just change her dress and that was it?
I mean, she could have, but let's think about this. If you're bludgeoning somebody, there's cast off.
Mm-hmm.
And she had to have been, this isn't an axe. This is a hatchet. So she's pretty close to their heads. She's close to them. There's no way that she didn't have cast off. The killer did not have blood cast off this body as they're beating them 17 times and 19 times. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure she had blood all over her face, but maybe that's where those bloody towels come in.
Maybe it is.
Yeah. Oh, so many questions.
So many questions. Hopefully next week we'll have some answers and some theories.
All right. Well, that's just my take on that. So let's move away from my take and go to these takes of just total idiots with a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. Number one, we have, that's not a knife.
I love love that movie.
I do too. A guy with a knife tried to rob a cashier in Alabama on Saturday, but the cashier pulled out a machete.
A bigger knife.
Yep. This is a knife. And locked the front doors. Then after the guy broke the doors down, the cashier ran outside and used the machete to smash up his car.
Wow.
Yeah, the whole thing was caught on security cameras.
So the person with the machete locked the person with the knife inside with him? Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, he was the store guy.
That's
I don't know if he was the owner. Anyway, all right. Number 2, maybe next time try Barney.
Okay.
I love you. Okay. A guy in Missouri that allegedly live streamed threats to bomb and kill people while he was in character as the DC villain known as the Joker.
Oh, my gosh.
Claims that it was just a joke.
It was a joke from the Joker.
There you go. The incident went down back in March of 2020, but has finally been updated. The man behind the Joker stunt is Jeremy Garnier. He claims that he was in character and that everybody knew that it was a joke. He says that he was acting and talking like the Joker, but that he had no intentions of following through with any of the threats.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. After prosecutors reduced the charge from a felony, Garnier was sentenced to 60 days in jail, plus credit for time served after pleading guilty to a misdemeanor charge of making a terrorist threat.
Yeah, that'll get you in trouble.
Yeah, this should go without saying, but if you don't want to go to jail, maybe play a character that isn't known for killing innocent people and terrorism in comic books and movies. You know, like maybe Barney.
Oh, okay. Now I see where Barney comes
There you
in.
go.
Gotcha.
Number 3, and finally. Nothing to see here.
Move along.
That's it. If you're planning to break the law, you might want to put a little pre-thought to keeping yourself off the radar.
Okay.
According to reports, in Elkins, West Virginia, 51-year-old Lindsay Studer was pulled over by police for an exhaust that was emitting excessive and unusual noises.
Like from the muffler? Like, okay,
Yeah. It was very loud.
Okay.
It turns out Studer also had a suspended license for unpaid citations.
Go figure.
But the fun didn't end there, though.
Okay.
Studer's constricted pupils, fidgety demeanor, and the machete between the front seat at the console.
Machete.
It's machete day here at It's the Homicide. A machete between the front seat at the console led cops to look a little further into the situation. That's when they found, with the help of a canine unit, a loaded hypodermic needle with an unidentified substance, 46.95 grams of meth, 0.8 grams of either heroin or fentanyl, a mushroom, a container of THC dabs, and 4 tramadol pills.
Wow.
There
he
you
was
go.
loaded for bear, man.
Let's party.
Yeah.
It might have been worth it to fix the damn car, you think?
Yeah, for real, man.
Oh, man.
But if his pupils were dilated and he was fidgety, he wasn't thinking about that car. He didn't give a flying flip about that car.
I was thinking about the next fix. Anyway, there's your bless your hearts.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu. And while you're there, you can also suggest a case like this one that everybody suggested.
Yeah.
Or you could tell us about your brush with true crime.
There you go.
That is my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.